On the morning of December 26, 2004, nothing felt dangerous. The sun rose the same way it always does in the tropics. Slow, warm, predictable. Palm trees barely moved. The ocean breathed gently against the shore. It was Sunday, the day people trust the most. At resorts along the coast of Thailand, breakfast buffets were already open. Coffee cups steamed. Plates clinked. Cameras flashed. Western tourists stepped outside barefoot, sand cool under their feet, already thinking about nothing more than sunscreen and lunch plans. Parents watched their children run ahead toward the water, laughing, chasing each other, leaving footprints that the tide slowly erased. This was supposed to be one of those perfect days you remember years later and say, that was when everything felt easy. No alarms, no warnings, no sirens, just waves, just sunlight, just vacation. Thousands of miles away, the same calm stretched across Sri Lanka's coastline. Fishing villages were awake. Nets were being prepared. Boats were already out at sea. In Indonesia, along the coast of Aceh, families moved through their normal morning routines. Morning prayers had ended. Breakfast was being prepared. Children were getting ready to play. Nothing felt urgent. Nothing felt wrong. And that's the most dangerous part of this story, because disasters rarely announce themselves the way movies teach us to expect. There was no shaking strong enough to send people running, no explosions, no fire, no reason to believe that the world was about to break. If you had been there that morning, you wouldn't have felt lucky. You would have felt safe, and safety has a way of lowering your guard. The ocean that day did not look angry. It did not roar. It did not threaten. It shimmered. Tourists waded in knee-deep, letting the water cool their legs. Children bent down to touch the foam as it dissolved between their fingers. Somewhere, someone laughed. Somewhere else, a camera shutter clicked. Life was happening at full speed. This matters because when people later ask how so many could be caught off guard, the answer isn't ignorance. It's trust. People trusted the morning. They trusted the ocean they had swum in yesterday. They trusted the idea that if something terrible were about to happen, someone would warn them. But there was no warning system here. No network of sirens along the Indian Ocean coastline. No coordinated alerts, no shared protocols. In the Pacific, countries had tsunami warnings. In the Indian Ocean, they did not. Not because scientists didn't understand tsunamis. Not because the threat was unknown, but because the disaster everyone feared hadn't happened yet. And until it does, prevention often feels unnecessary. That morning, hotels did not evacuate. Staff did not usher guests inland. No one interrupted breakfast, because there was nothing to interrupt, at least nothing visible. What makes this moment so unsettling isn't what people were doing, it's what they weren't. No one was checking the horizon with fear. No one was counting seconds. No one was preparing to run. They were relaxed, and relaxation is the last emotion you feel before catastrophe rewrites everything. The Indian Ocean had always been there, calm, vast, familiar. It had fed communities for generations. It had carried ships, fishermen, traders, families. No one wakes up next to the sea expecting it to betray them. And yet, beneath that calm surface, something had already happened. Something enormous, something irreversible. But on the shore, no one knew. And maybe that's the hardest truth of all. On December 26, 2004, the world didn't feel like it was ending. It felt like a normal Sunday morning, and that is why almost no one ran. While the beaches remained calm, the earth had already begun to move. Not on the shore, not where anyone could see it, but far beneath the Indian Ocean. At 7:58 a.m. local time, deep below the seabed off the coast of northern Sumatra, two massive tectonic plates slipped past each other. Not suddenly, not violently at first. They dragged for nearly 10 minutes. This wasn't a typical earthquake. Most quakes are over in seconds. This one kept going, and every second it continued, more energy was being released into the planet than humans had ever recorded before. A magnitude 9.1, one of the strongest earthquakes in modern history. But on the surface, almost nothing changed. In Thailand, tourists didn't spill their coffee. In Sri Lanka, fishermen didn't fall from their boats. In Indonesia, most people didn't even feel the ground move. The rupture happened under miles of water. The ocean absorbed the violence, and in doing so, it hid the danger. That's why so few people reacted, because humans are trained to respond to what they can feel. Shaking buildings, cracking walls, sirens. None of that happened here. The Earth moved in silence, but in seismic monitoring centers around the world, screens began to light up. Instruments detected something unusual, then something alarming, then something unprecedented. Lines spiked off the charts. Alarms sounded, not on coastlines but in research facilities. Scientists stared at their monitors, watching the numbers climb higher and higher. This wasn't just an earthquake. This was a planetary event. Entire sections of the Earth's crust had shifted. The seafloor lifted, in some places, by more than 10 meters. That vertical movement displaced billions of tons of water, and water doesn't absorb that kind of force. It carries it. The ocean above the rupture began to move outward in every direction. Not as a wave you could see, not yet. At first it was just energy, traveling silently through the deep ocean at the speed of a jetliner, hundreds of miles per hour, crossing entire basins while coastlines remained unaware. This is the part most people misunderstand. Tsunamis are not giant waves forming instantly near shore. They are long, invisible surges racing across open water, barely noticeable to ships above them. They don't roar. They don't rise. They wait. And while that energy was spreading across the Indian Ocean, something else was happening. Or rather, something wasn't. There was no coordinated warning, no sirens along the coast, no emergency broadcasts, no evacuation orders. Not because the science didn't exist, but because the system didn't. The Indian Ocean had no tsunami warning network in 2004, no shared infrastructure, no agreed-upon protocol. Countries bordering the ocean operated independently. Seismic data existed, but communication lagged. Decisions took time, and time was the one thing no one had. In some monitoring centers, scientists debated what they were seeing. Was it big enough to matter? Could it generate a tsunami? Who should be notified? There was no single authority responsible for answering those questions. And so the clock kept ticking. Every minute that passed, the waves traveled farther. Toward Thailand, toward Sri Lanka, toward India, toward Africa. A global disaster unfolding in slow motion. Unseen, unfelt, unannounced. On the beaches, people continued their mornings. Breakfast continued. Children kept playing. Boats stayed at sea, because nothing had told them to stop. This is what makes this disaster different. Not the size of the earthquake, but the silence that followed it. Because by the time the ocean reached the shore, the disaster was no longer preventable, only survivable. And even that would depend on luck. This wasn't a sudden catastrophe. It was a failure that stretched across borders, systems, and assumptions. A failure to share information, a failure to act quickly, a failure to imagine the worst-case scenario. And while the world hesitated, the ocean kept moving. At first, it didn't feel like danger. It felt like something unusual. Along coastlines across the Indian Ocean, the water began to retreat, slowly, quietly. The tide didn't crash backward, it didn't rush, it simply kept pulling away, meter by meter. In Thailand, beachgoers stopped mid-step and looked down. The water that had been at their ankles was suddenly gone. Wet sand stretched farther than anyone had ever seen it before. The shoreline moved outward, exposing rocks, coral, and seabed that were never meant to be seen by human eyes. People stared, not in fear, in curiosity. Children ran forward, laughing, chasing the water as it retreated. Parents followed, phones and cameras already raised. To them, this didn't look like a warning. It looked like an opportunity. In Sri Lanka, fishermen noticed their boats tilting as the water level dropped beneath them. Some stepped off onto the exposed seafloor. They had lived by the ocean their entire lives. Low tides happened. Strange tides happened. But nothing bad followed them, at least not in memory. In Aceh, Indonesia, the sea pulled back so far that entire sections of coastline disappeared. The ocean seemed to be leaving. Fish flopped helplessly on the sand, bright silver bodies twisting in the sun. Children ran toward them. People bent down to touch them, to collect them, to laugh. No one was screaming. No one was shouting warnings. There were no sirens telling people to turn back, because no one understood what they were seeing. This is the moment that defines the disaster, not the wave. This moment, the moment when the ocean breaks its own rules. And instead of running away, humans walked closer. The water looked calm, too calm. It didn't churn, it didn't foam violently. It simply receded, revealing a world that normally stays hidden. To the human brain, this didn't register as threat. Threats are loud, threats move fast, threats look aggressive. This looked gentle, almost playful, almost inviting. People pointed. They took photos. They stepped farther out than they ever had before. Some walked hundreds of feet from the original shoreline, standing where boats had floated minutes earlier. The ocean didn't look dangerous, it looked curious. And curiosity is powerful. It overrides instinct. It silences caution. It convinces people that what they are seeing is rare, but harmless. No one had taught them otherwise. In parts of the world familiar with tsunamis, this moment is recognized instantly. When the sea pulls back, you run. But along the Indian Ocean in 2004, that knowledge didn't exist. Generations had lived and died without ever witnessing a tsunami. There were no drills, no signs, no collective memory to draw from. So people did what humans always do in the absence of information. They trusted their eyes, and their eyes told them everything was fine. This retreat didn't feel violent. It felt slow, controlled, as if the ocean were breathing in. But what people didn't know, what they couldn't know, was that the water wasn't disappearing, it was gathering. Every step the sea pulled back was energy being stored. Every exposed patch of seabed was a warning written in a language no one there could read. Some people hesitated. A few stopped and looked around. They sensed something was off. But uncertainty doesn't cause panic. It causes delay. And delay in a disaster like this is deadly. The silence made it worse. No roar, no thunder, no visual cue that said, "Run, now!" Just an ocean behaving strangely, and humans behaving exactly the way humans always do. They moved toward the mystery, because nothing in their experience told them not to. By the time the water stopped retreating, many people were farther from safety than they had ever been in their lives, standing on ground that would soon vanish, still calm, still curious, still unaware that the ocean was about to return. Not gently, not slowly, but all at once. At first, there was no sound, just a pause. The ocean, which had been pulling away for minutes, seemed to stop. For a brief moment, everything felt suspended, as if the world was holding its breath. Then the water began to return, not as a wave, not as something familiar. It came back as a wall, a solid mass of water rising at the horizon, growing taller as it moved, not curling, not breaking, advancing. From a distance, it didn't look fast. That's what made it deadly. People didn't run because they didn't understand what they were seeing. They had never seen the ocean behave like this before. What they were looking at wasn't a surge. It wasn't a storm wave. It was a moving body of water as tall as buildings, carrying the weight of the entire ocean behind it. By the time people realized it was dangerous, it was already too close. For a family on vacation in Thailand, the moment arrived without warning. They were standing far from the original shoreline, cameras still in hand. 1 second, they were watching the ocean. The next, they were watching it rise. There was no time to debate, no time to plan, just confusion. Parents grabbed their children and turned to run. But the ground beneath their feet was flat, open, and exposed. There was nowhere high to go. The wall of water reached them in seconds, not crashing, overwhelming. It knocked people off their feet before they could take more than a few steps. Buildings didn't collapse dramatically. They were pushed apart. Wood, concrete, cars, trees, everything became debris, and debris became weapons. For a local resident in Aceh, Indonesia, the sound came first. A deep roar that didn't match anything in nature he had ever heard. Not wind, not thunder, something heavier. He turned just in time to see water filling the street, not flowing, charging. The force was instant. Houses were torn from their foundations. Motorcycles lifted and spun. The street he had walked down his entire life disappeared under moving water. He ran, But running didn't mean escape. It meant survival measured in seconds. The water slammed into buildings and rebounded, trapping people in currents that crushed them against walls. Most victims didn't have time to panic. Panic requires awareness. This was faster than awareness. For a child near the shoreline, the world changed in an instant. One moment, they were standing with other children, looking at fish on the sand. The next, the ground vanished. The water picked them up and threw them without warning. There was no sense of direction, no sense of up or down, just darkness, pressure, and noise. The child didn't drown. They were hit by wood, by stone, by pieces of homes and lives torn apart. This is the truth most people don't realize. Most people didn't drown. They were crushed before they could run. The wall of water didn't give people a chance to fight. It removed the fight entirely. In minutes, entire neighborhoods were erased. Streets became rivers. Buildings became piles. Landmarks disappeared so completely that survivors later struggled to describe where they had once stood. The water didn't stop at the shoreline. It kept going, inland, through towns, through villages, through lives. When the surge finally began to slow, it didn't leave quietly. It dragged everything back with it. People, cars, homes, memories, pulled back toward the sea in a second wave of destruction. The silence that followed was worse than the noise. No music, no shouting, just water draining away, leaving behind what the ocean had decided to spare. Survivors stood where cities had been, trying to understand how minutes earlier everything had existed, and now almost nothing did. This wasn't chaos. Chaos implies randomness. This was force, precise, overwhelming, unstoppable, and it had taken less than 10 minutes. When the water finally pulled back, it didn't reveal a city. It revealed absence. Streets were gone. Homes were gone. Entire neighborhoods had been erased so completely that survivors struggled to explain where they had once lived. Landmarks that had existed for generations vanished in minutes. What remained looked unfamiliar, even to the people who had grown up there. The ocean left behind mud, debris, and silence. A silence heavy enough to feel physical. People wandered through the wreckage, calling names that would never be answered. Some searched for family, some searched for landmarks, trying to orient themselves in a place that no longer made sense. Others just stood still, because there was nothing left to do. The scale of the destruction became clear slowly, not through dramatic images, but through counting. How many were missing? How many were injured? How many villages no longer appeared on maps? Entire coastlines had been reshaped. In Aceh, Thailand, Sri Lanka, and beyond, the tsunami didn't just take lives, it rewrote geography. Within hours, the world began to respond. Planes landed with supplies. Ships arrived with aid. Doctors, soldiers, and volunteers crossed oceans to help people they had never met. The international response was massive and heartfelt, but it was also late. Aid can save lives after disasters. It cannot undo the moment when information failed to travel faster than water. As rescue teams worked through the rubble, another realization spread quietly through governments and scientific communities. This didn't have to be this bad. The earthquake had been detected. The data had existed, but there was no system to turn knowledge into action. No unified warning network for the Indian Ocean, no sirens along the coast, no clear authority responsible for sounding the alarm. The silence wasn't natural, it was human-made. In the Pacific, tsunami warning systems had existed for decades, but the Indian Ocean had been left unprotected. Not out of malice, out of assumption. Assumption that the worst wouldn't happen, assumption that rare disasters could be dealt with later. Assumption that silence was acceptable. After the bodies were buried and the cameras moved on, that assumption collapsed. Governments worked with scientists to build something that should have existed long before. A regional tsunami warning system. Sensors placed on the seafloor. Monitoring stations connected across borders. Protocols designed to turn seismic data into immediate alerts. Today, sirens stand where there were none in 2004. Warnings can now travel faster than waves. The system is not perfect, but it exists. And it exists because of what was lost. This is the uncomfortable truth of progress. We often build safety systems only after discovering how unsafe we were. The tsunami wasn't unstoppable. The silence was. Silence between institutions, silence between countries, silence between knowledge and action. Nature didn't fail humanity that day. Humanity failed itself. And the cost of that failure is written across coastlines that will never look the same again.